Welcome. Today we're going to learn a little bit more about employment issues with Greenville attorney Amy Wells. Amy works for Gaylord, McNally, Strickland, and Snyder. She has over 20 years of experience working with business owners from forming a business to exit planning and exit strategies and operational issues for the life of the business. So I want to welcome Amy Wells today. Amy, how are you doing today?
Hey Dave, I'm great. Hope you are.
I am. Thanks for being with us today. Well,
Thanks
first of
for having me.
all, I want to ask, how have you and your family done with this pandemic?
Well, we're having the same struggles I think everybody is. I have two boys that are home doing homeschool. Our silver lining to the cloud has been that my husband, who's stationed in the military in Maryland, has been home for about 6 weeks. So we've been very fortunate to get to spend time together and everybody's healthy.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, the first question I want to ask, Amy, is what are the most common issues that you're seeing for your business owner clients related to the COVID legislation, especially regarding employment laws?
The most common questions I'm getting are those related to paying for additional benefits to employees who are out of work for COVID related reasons. There is an act that was passed by Congress that applies to leave that's taken from April 1st through December 31st of this year for COVID related reasons. And that gives the employees either 2 weeks of paid sick leave and 10 weeks of modified FMLA leave. And that's regardless of what the employer's policies are. If the employer, this is only applicable to employers with less than 500 employees. The amount the employee can get varies based on the reason that the employee's not there. But the big issue for the employer is that they do have to pay that person regardless of what their existing paid sick leave policy is. And they can't require the employee to use existing paid sick leave to cover that period. The intent of the legislation is that the employer will be reimbursed by this from a tax credit. So it's been important for employers to make sure that they have the appropriate documentation to support the rationale for the leave that they're paying so they can get the correct tax credit. And that's something that I encourage my clients to talk to counsel or to a CPA about to make sure that they're properly documenting that leave that they give to people, as well as making sure that they claim it correctly on their returns. A lot of clients don't realize this applies even if a client has an employee teleworking and they're unable to telework, for example, because they have a child at home out of school that they're having to take care of or homeschool. Now, if the employer had to close, say, for example, they weren't allowed to continue working under the governor's order, these benefits do not apply. And at that point, your employees go and apply for unemployment. That changes a little bit as businesses reopen.
Well, that sounds very complex. So, my question to you is what percentage of your business owner clients are aware of these rules and regulations?
I would say that the ones that were able to continue to operate are probably 60% are aware that they are out there. They're just not aware of exactly what it means for them.
So, it certainly sounds like as a business owner, you want to have a good team of professionals like yourself that you can rely on to go get this information. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, and it's important because the laws mix together with the benefits you may have applied for or given to your employees beforehand and the benefits they have now. So a lot of people need someone to call to say, hey, this person already took FMLA this year. What am I supposed to do?
Yeah. So, Amy, what are your tips for bringing employees back to the workspace or office?
Well, small businesses, or smaller businesses, unlike large corporations, IBM, for example, technically have real close relationships with their employees. And so they're concerned about the health, safety, and well-being of their employees in a more integral way than maybe larger businesses are. But these businesses have been facing economic hardships, and so they need to open. And they're worried about liability if they are not considered to be providing a safe enough environment for their employees. And unfortunately, in most situations right now, there's not a lot of binding guidance for employers on exactly what the safety standards they're supposed to meet are. Now, one of the things I tell clients as they're starting to reopen is that if they have sort of a trade association that's applicable to their particular industry, like, for example, the ADA works with dentists. That's just one example.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those trade associations have been promulgating some guidelines. And of course, right now, those aren't binding. They're just out there for informational purposes to try to help dental practices, just in my example. Now, those may become sort of a standard of care. And I'm not just saying that in terms of the health industry, but something that later down the road, a potential employee who might be looking at a claim could look at and say, well, your association promulgated these guidelines and you didn't even follow them. So the first thing I tell clients is there some industry group that provides information for your industry? Look at that first, make sure you've taken that into account. But businesses that don't have that kind of guidance, and that's a lot of us that are sitting out there, what do? Well, OSHA and the CDC have put out some general guidelines that are mostly common sense type of things. Review your operating procedures. Can your business operate remotely, and can you continue to do that? If you have people from the public coming in, have you looked at ways you can provide protection for those people through, appointments only, making sure you've got hand sanitizer available? How can you social distance? Those kind of things. But then we start talking about your employees and protecting your employees. I personally advise my clients, one of the most important things they can do for their employees is have their employees involved in the process. Mm-hmm. Talk to your employees and have meetings with them about what their particular concerns are to try to figure out how you can integrate those in there. And also, you're doing some training with your employees at the same time on some of the things that the CDC and OSHA are talking about that generally apply to all industries. Things like sanitization, the social distancing, why we're not all going to gather in the break room for prolonged chats. Thinking about where in the office could be a big source of contamination. Everybody touches the copier buttons, for example, those kinds of things. Have your employees involved and have them buy in. The other thing I tell employers that it's important to remember is if you have somebody with symptoms, tell them to stay home. Mm-hmm. So many times we worry about as an employee, we may worry about making sure that we're being very diligent, that we're fulfilling our employer's expectations. As an employer, make sure it's clear to your employees, your expectation is that they will stay home, or if they start to have symptoms at work, that they will leave. The North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services has guidance online on what to do if you have an employee that has COVID symptoms. And at that point, I tell my clients, this is what you need to make sure you follow. Now, keep in mind when I just mentioned that when businesses were closed, they don't have to pay their employees if they're closed. The additional time off doesn't apply if your business had to close because of COVID, because you didn't have work or there was a mandatory order. But as you reopen, that applies again. And I've started seeing more people coming to ask me questions on how that can work. Now, the last couple points on reopening, a lot of people have asked me about screening. Can we screen our employees? The answer to that is you can do some screening as long as you are fair to everyone. You cannot require a negative COVID test in most situations for somebody to return to work. You can test temperature. The other thing is if somebody does have COVID and goes out and gets tested and is positive, as an employer, the employer cannot go around the office and tell all the other employees that Joe has tested positive for COVID. Joe has HIPAA rights. Yep. And Joe's privacy needs to be protected. Doesn't mean the employer doesn't take the steps that are recommended by the Department of Health and Human Services, but we can't make disclosures of Joe's medical information.
Amy, I tell you, we live in a different world right now, and obviously it's become much more complicated. And I tell you, just listening to you, it makes me realize even more than before how important it is to have a professional to go to get the clear answers that I need specifically to my business. So first of all, I want to say thank you for sharing with us. Real quick, your phone number if anyone wants to call you.
Sure. It's 252-321-7111.
Thank you very much, Amy. And we'll see all of you in the very near future, and we wish you the best.